Okay, and Kubi, can you tell me about what Gender Links is doing during the 16 days of activism to create awareness?
Gender Links will be working with 50 local councils across the SADC region in 10 countries, and we will be working with them on, many of them already have gender-based violence action plans. We'll be looking at what they've achieved and reprioritizing. We will also look at strategic communications using social media, how you raise awareness in communities around gender-based violence. And that comes from a belief, a strong belief, that we can have all the best policies and legislation in place. However, the people closest to this problem are local councils. You know, local government are at the coal face. They deal with the violence in a very real way on a daily basis. So we need to talk more and more about how local government can address gender-based violence, particularly because we want to reach communities and homes. We will also be working with national governments in several countries to look at what the research we have done is telling us and how we can relook strategies. Because as I mentioned earlier, the strategies are heavily weighted towards response and support of gender-based violence rather than prevention. And a real understanding through the research now we have evidence that tells us how the research, what are the forms of violence, how is it manifesting, its effects and drivers. And one of the biggest challenges, again, is how do we reach people in their homes?
Right. And Kubi, how do we prevent gender-based violence?
Well, it's interesting. In the research, everyone keeps talking about poverty, unemployment, as drivers of gender-based violence. That's not what we're seeing at all. What we're seeing is that the biggest driver of gender-based violence are both men and women who've experienced violence in their childhood. The majority of the men who perpetrated violence had themselves experienced violence as children. They experienced abuse, physical abuse, neglect, and sexual abuse. Same for women. So I think as strategy, we really need to start looking at schools, looking at the safety and security of children, because when they speak about the cycle of violence, I think that is the primary cause, the fact that this continues from generation to generation and we don't break that cycle. And people who are being violent have themselves experienced violence. So that is the biggest driver. It is not economic. In Botswana, for example, we found that the people who are experiencing violence, women, the highest proportion of these women are employed and educated. The same for perpetration by men. So, the socioeconomic is not a huge factor.